Daniel Carter drove his fist into that front door so hard the hinges jumped in their frame. "Olivia, open up, it's me." No answer came, so he shouldered the door open himself and found her on her knees on the kitchen floor, a shattered tray of bread scattered around her, one hand pressed flat against her chest like she'd just seen a dead man walk. He'd driven 1,100 miles and come home 3 weeks early to surprise the woman who'd practically raised his boy while he was gone. He never once expected to find her like this. And he sure never expected the 4 words she'd whisper next. 4 words that would tear open a secret she'd been guarding for 6 long years. Before we go on, do me a favor. Drop the name of your city down in the comments so I can see just how far this story travels tonight. And if you still believe a good heart matters more than a pretty face, hit that subscribe button and follow along, because friend, this story was written for you. Daniel Carter had made a lot of promises in his 36 years, and he'd broken damn few of them. He'd promised his dying wife he'd raise their boy right. He'd promised the fire chief he'd take the out-of-state assignment nobody else wanted. And somewhere along the way in the quiet hours between shifts, he'd made himself a third promise, the one he never said out loud, the one he kept buried so deep he'd almost convinced himself it wasn't there at all. But that morning, sitting in his truck outside a house he'd been away from for 4 months, all 3 of those promises were pushing against each other in his chest, and he couldn't have told you which one was winning. He'd finished the assignment early. 3 weeks early. The wildfire crews down south had gotten a handle on the situation faster than anyone predicted, and when his supervisor pulled him aside and said, "Carter, go home. You've earned it." Daniel hadn't even packed properly. He'd thrown his gear in the back of the truck and driven straight through 2 states' gas station coffee and a heart that kept beating a little too fast. He told himself it was because of Ethan. His boy. 8 years old now, probably grown an inch since he'd been gone. He told himself that. But the truck was parked in front of the wrong house. Not his own. Not the little gray place at the end of the street where his sister was watching Ethan until school let out. No, Daniel's truck was parked in front of the pale yellow house next door. The one with the flower boxes in every window and the hand-painted sign by the porch that read, "Bennett's Bakery Fresh Daily." The one that always, no matter the season, smelled faintly of cinnamon and warm sugar. Olivia's house. Daniel gripped the steering wheel and let out a slow breath. "Just say hello," he muttered to himself. "That's all. You say hello, you thank her for everything, and then you go see your son." Simple. Except nothing about Olivia Bennett had ever been simple, and Daniel had spent the better part of 2 years pretending otherwise. He climbed out of the truck. His boots hit the gravel, and every step up her walk felt heavier than the last. He'd carried grown men out of burning buildings. He'd walked into collapsing structures without his hands shaking. And here he was, a decorated firefighter sweating through his shirt because he was about to knock on a baker's door. He knocked. Nothing. He knocked again harder. "Olivia, you home?" That's when he heard a crash from inside. Not a small crash. The heavy final sound of something ceramic hitting the floor and giving up. Daniel's whole body changed in an instant. The nervousness burned off like fog. 12 years of instinct kicked in. "Olivia." He hammered his fist against the door. "Open up. It's me." No answer. He didn't wait. He tried the handle, found it unlocked, and shoved the door open. And there she was. Olivia Bennett was down on her knees on the kitchen floor, surrounded by the shattered remains of a tray of morning bread, one hand pressed hard against her chest. Her face had gone white as chalk. She was staring up at him like he was a ghost, like she'd conjured him out of thin air and couldn't quite believe he'd actually appeared. "Olivia." Daniel dropped to a crouch, hands already reaching for her. Hey, look at me. Are you hurt? Talk to me." She didn't answer. She just kept staring, her lips trembling. "Olivia." His voice went firm, steady. The voice he used on scared people who couldn't hear anything else. "I need you to tell me if you're hurt." And that's when she said them. The 4 words. "Daniel, you're really here." He blinked. Yeah, I'm here. I'm right here. Are you?" But she wasn't listening to the answer. Her eyes had filled up brimming and spilling before she could stop them, and her hand came off her chest and reached out and grabbed a fistful of his shirt like she needed to feel the fabric to believe it was real. "You're really here," she said again, and her voice broke clean in half. "Easy," Daniel said gentler now. "Easy. It's just me. It's just Daniel. I came home early, that's all. I didn't mean to scare you. I heard the crash and I thought—" He didn't finish. Because Olivia Bennett, 32 years old, the strongest, most self-possessed woman he'd ever known. The woman who'd stood in this very kitchen through insults and stares and the cruelty of small-minded people without ever once letting them see her flinch, leaned forward and pressed her face into his shoulder and started to cry like something inside her had finally, after years of holding, let go. Daniel froze. He didn't know what to do with his hands. He didn't know what to do with any part of himself. He knelt there on her broken kitchen floor with pieces of bread digging into his knees and a woman weeping into his shoulder, and for the life of him he could not understand what was happening. "Olivia," he said carefully. "What's going on? This isn't you don't cry. In 2 years, I've never seen you cry." She laughed then, a wet, broken little laugh against his collarbone. "You have no idea," she whispered, "how many times I've cried in this kitchen." "When?" "Every time you left." Daniel went very still. Slowly, because he wasn't sure his own legs would hold, he shifted back so he could see her face. Her makeup was ruined. Her eyes were swollen, and she was more beautiful in that moment than he had any right to notice. "Olivia," he said, "what are you talking about?" She wiped her cheeks with the back of her flour-dusted hand and let out a shaky breath, and for a second he thought she was going to tell him. Whatever it was. The thing that was living behind her eyes. But then she pulled it back. He watched her do it, watched her gather herself up piece by piece the way she always did, and tuck the truth away somewhere he couldn't reach. "Nothing," she said. "I'm being ridiculous. You scared the daylights out of me, that's all. I thought you weren't back for another 3 weeks. Ethan's been counting the days on the calendar. He's got a big red circle around the 28th. "He does?" "He does. He comes over every afternoon and moves the little magnet." She managed a smile, though it wobbled. "He's very serious about it." Daniel felt something twist in his chest. His son. His son had been coming over here every single day, marking the days until his father came home, and Daniel hadn't known. He'd been 1,100 miles away, telling himself the boy was fine, that the boy was tough, that missing a father was just something children learn to do. "He's been coming here every day?" Daniel asked, and his voice wasn't quite steady. Olivia's expression softened. "Where else would he go? Your sister works till 5. He gets off the bus at 3:30, so he comes here and he does his homework at that counter." She nodded toward the flower-covered island. "And I make him a snack and we talk about his day." She paused. "Mostly he talks about you." "About me? You're all he talks about, Daniel." She said it gently, but there was a weight underneath it. "Every story starts with my dad. My dad's a firefighter. My dad ran into a building once and saved a whole family. My dad's stronger than anybody's dad." She looked down at her hands. "That boy loves you more than his own heartbeat." Daniel had to look away. He'd spent 4 months telling himself the assignment was for Ethan. Better money. A promotion when he got back. A bigger cushion in the college fund. He'd built the whole thing into a monument of fatherly sacrifice, and it had let him sleep at night. But sitting on Olivia's kitchen floor listening to her describe his son moving a little magnet across a calendar, he understood something he hadn't let himself understand before. He hadn't left for Ethan. He'd left to run. "Come on," Olivia said, pushing herself up with a wince. "Let's get off this floor before we both need a chiropractor. And don't you dare help me clean up. You just drove halfway across the country. I'm not going to sit there and watch you sweep up bread." "You most certainly are." She grabbed a broom from the corner and pointed it at him like a weapon. "Sit. Down. Daniel Carter. I have been running this bakery on my own for 6 years. I think I can handle a broken tray." He sat down. Not because she'd told him to, because there was something in the way she said his full name, Daniel Carter, like it belonged to her a little. like she'd said it to herself 1,000 times when he wasn't around. That made his chest go tight and warm all at once. He sat at the counter and watched her sweep, and for a while, neither of them said anything. The only sounds were the scrape of the broom and the tick of the clock over the stove, and the distant hum of a refrigerator that had been running since before Daniel ever moved to that street. "You look tired," Olivia said finally, not looking up. "You look like you haven't slept in a month." "I haven't really. Fires don't keep office hours." "Was it bad down there?" Daniel thought about how to answer that. He thought about the families who'd lost everything, the animals they couldn't save, the one night the wind changed and a whole crew nearly didn't make it back. "It was bad," he said simply. Olivia stopped sweeping. She looked at him then, and her eyes weren't wet anymore. They were steady and kind, and they saw straight through him the way they always had. "You don't have to make it sound smaller than it was," she said. "Not with me. You never had to do that with me." And there it was, the thing he'd been running from. Because Olivia Bennett had always seen him. Not the uniform, not the hero the neighborhood kids looked up to, not the tragic widower everyone whispered about at the grocery store. Just Daniel. Tired, scared, grieving Daniel, who'd lost his wife too young and didn't know how to be a father alone, and hid it all behind a jaw he kept clenched so no one would notice it shaking. She'd seen him, and she'd never once made him feel small for it. "I missed this," Daniel heard himself say. "Missed what?" "This, talking to you. Down there when it got bad, and it got bad a lot, I'd think about this kitchen." He shook his head. "That sounds crazy." "It doesn't sound crazy. I'd think about the way it smells in here, and I'd think, Olivia's probably up already. She's probably got the ovens going." He looked at her. "It got me through some nights thinking about that." Olivia set the broom against the wall very slowly, like she needed a moment to figure out what to do with her hands. "Daniel," she said quietly. "Yeah." She opened her mouth, and he could see it again, the truth, right there pushing against the back of her teeth, desperate to get out. But then the timer on the oven went off shrill and sudden, and the moment shattered as cleanly as the tray had. "That's the croissants," she said, turning away fast. "I'll be right back. Don't move." Daniel didn't move. He sat there and listened to her open the oven and slide the tray out and set it down. And he stared at the calendar on her refrigerator, the same calendar Ethan had been marking. He realized, with a little red circle around the 28th and a child's careful handwriting beneath it that read, "Dad comes home." And below that, in the corner, almost hidden smaller, so much smaller in an adult's hand, 3 words Olivia had clearly never meant for anyone to see. "Please come back." Daniel stared at those 3 words for a long, long time. He thought about the offer, the one he hadn't told anyone about yet, the fire department in the next county over the one that had called him twice while he was away, offering him a captain's position. More money, more responsibility, a chance to build something. The catch was, it meant relocating. Selling the gray house at the end of the street. Pulling Ethan out of school. Starting over somewhere new. Somewhere with no memories of the wife he'd lost. Somewhere he could finally stop being the town's sad story. He'd been leaning toward taking it. He'd been leaning hard. Because Daniel Carter's secret, the third promise, the one he never said out loud, was that after his wife died, he had sworn to himself he would never love another woman as long as he lived. Not for his own sake. For Ethan's. He'd decided in the black weeks after the funeral that his boy had already lost one mother, and he would be damned if he'd ever let Ethan get attached to a woman only to lose her too. It was a good promise. A noble promise. The kind of promise a good father makes. And it had one enormous glaring flaw that Daniel had spent 2 years refusing to look at directly. The flaw was standing at the oven 12 feet away, pulling out a tray of croissants, humming under her breath, and the flaw's name was Olivia Bennett, because his son was already attached to her. Ethan already loved her. That ship hadn't just sailed, it had crossed the ocean and come back again. The boy came to her house every day. The boy told her about his life. The boy trusted her in a way he trusted almost no one else on this earth. And if Daniel took that captain's job, if he sold the house and moved his son to another county, he wouldn't be protecting Ethan from loss. He'd be handing it to him. "You're quiet over there," Olivia called out. "Just thinking, that's dangerous." She came back to the counter, carrying 2 plates each with a fresh croissant still steaming, and set one in front of him. "Eat. You look like you're running on fumes." Daniel looked down at the croissant, then up at her. "You didn't have to." "I know I didn't have to. Sit there and enjoy it before I take it back." He took a bite. And God help him, it was the best thing he'd eaten in 4 months. Warm and flaky and buttery and just faintly sweet, and it tasted like home in a way that hit him so hard and so unexpectedly that for one terrible second he thought he might actually cry in front of her. He didn't. He was Daniel Carter. He didn't cry. But it was close. "Good?" Olivia asked, watching his face. "It's the best thing I've ever eaten," he said, and meant it completely. She smiled, a real one this time, one that reached all the way up to her still swollen eyes, and shook her head. "You always did know how to make a woman feel appreciated." Something in the way she said appreciated landed strange. There was an edge to it, a history. Daniel filed it away. "So," Olivia said, sitting down across from him with her own plate, "are you going to tell me the real reason you drove 1,100 miles without stopping?" "I told you. The job finished early." "Uh-huh. It did." "I believe you that the job finished early." She tilted her head. "I don't believe that's why you didn't stop. You could have spent a night in a motel. You could have called ahead. Instead, you drove straight through and you came here first." She held his eyes. "Not to your sister's where your son is. Here." Daniel opened his mouth to deflect the way he always did, and found that he couldn't. Not with those flour-dusted hands folded on the counter and those tired, honest eyes fixed on him. "I don't know," he admitted, and it was maybe the truest thing he'd said in months. "I don't know why I came here first. I got off the highway and my hands turned the wheel, and this is where I ended up." Olivia went quiet. "That scares me a little," Daniel added, quieter still. "That I didn't decide it. That some part of me just knew." "Knew what?" He looked at her. And for a moment, one dangerous, wide-open moment, he almost told her. Almost said the thing that had been sitting in his chest for 2 years like a stone. "Knew that you were the first place I wanted to be. Knew that in 4 months of hell, you were the one I couldn't stop thinking about. Knew that I've been lying to myself about what you are to me since the day my wife died, and you showed up at my door with a casserole and didn't say a single stupid thing. You just handed it to me and said, 'I'll take Ethan whenever you need.' And I've been in love with you ever since, and too scared to admit it." He almost said all of it. But Daniel Carter had spent a lifetime keeping his promises. And the third promise, the never again, the never risk it, the never let Ethan get hurt, reached up out of the dark and grabbed him by the throat. "Nothing," he said. "I don't know what I'm saying. I'm exhausted." Olivia's face did something complicated. Disappointment, maybe. Or resignation. Like she'd watched a door start to open and then swing shut, and she'd seen it happen enough times that she'd stopped being surprised. "Right," she said softly. "You're exhausted." "Olivia." "It's fine, Daniel, really." She stood up and started clearing the plates, even though he'd barely finished. "You should go see Ethan. He's going to lose his mind when he sees you. Go on." "Wait." Daniel caught her wrist, gently, barely, just enough to stop her. She froze. They both did. Her wrist was warm under his fingers, and he could feel her pulse there, and it was going fast as his own had been going in the truck 20 minutes earlier. "Thank you," Daniel said. It came out rough. "For Ethan, for all of it. 4 months and you took my kid in every single day like he was your own, and you never asked me for a thing. I don't know how to pay you back for that." Olivia looked down at his hand on her wrist, then up at his face. "I don't want you to pay me back," she said. "Then what do you want?" The question hung in the air between them, huge and terrifying and impossible. And for one heartbeat, one single fragile heartbeat, Daniel thought she was going to answer it. He thought she was going to say the thing they'd both been dancing around for 2 years. He could see it right there in her eyes. But instead, she gently pulled her wrist free, and she smiled that smile again, the one that didn't quite reach, and she said, "I want you to go hug your son." And Daniel understood that he'd hurt her. Somehow, without meaning to, by grabbing that door and slamming it shut when she'd needed him to walk through it, he'd hurt the one person in the world who'd never done anything but care for him. "Olivia, go, Daniel." Her voice was steady, but he heard the strain under it. "That boy has been waiting 4 months. Don't make him wait another minute on my account." He stood up. He didn't want to leave. Every instinct in him was screaming to stay, to fix it, to say the thing. But he didn't know how, and he was so tired, and she was right about Ethan. He walked to the door, stopped, turned back. She was standing at the sink with her back to him, and even from across the room, he could see her shoulders had gone tight, holding something in. "Hey," Daniel said. She didn't turn around. "Yeah. That thing on your calendar." He watched her go very, very still. The 3 words, "in the corner." Her hands stopped moving in the sink. "I saw it," he said quietly. The silence that followed was so complete, he could hear the clock ticking again. "You weren't supposed to see that," Olivia whispered. "I know." "Daniel, I'm not going to pretend I didn't." He took a step back into the kitchen. "Olivia, look at me, please." Slowly, she turned around, and her face wasn't guarded anymore. It was raw, wide open. Everything she'd been hiding for 6 years was right there on the surface, and she was too tired to pull it back this time. "You want to know why I cry in this kitchen every time you leave?" she said, and her voice shook. "Fine, I'll tell you. But you're not going to want to hear it, and it's going to make everything strange. And I'm going to have to keep watching your son every day, knowing that I told you, and you didn't feel the same, so I really wish you hadn't seen that calendar." "Olivia, no. You wanted the truth, you're going to get it." She wiped her eyes, fast, angry at herself for the tears. "You are the only man in my entire life who ever looked at me, really looked at me, and didn't wince. You know that 32 years. Every man before you either wanted to fix me, or feel sorry for me, or use me as a shoulder until something better came along. Somebody they could appreciate for a while, and then leave for someone thinner, someone prettier, someone easier to be seen with in public. That's not... Let me finish." Her chin came up. "And then you moved in next door, and you were grieving, and you were broken, and you had this little boy who needed somebody, and I thought, fine, I'll help. That's what neighbors do. And I helped. And somewhere in there, you started looking at me like I was worth looking at. And you never once made me feel like I was too much. Too big, too plain, too anything. You just saw me." Her voice cracked completely. "Do you have any idea what that does to a person who spent her whole life being overlooked? Do you have any idea, Daniel?" Daniel couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "So yes," Olivia said, tears streaming down now past caring, "I cry when you leave. Because for a little while when you're here, I get to feel like maybe I'm not just the woman people are grateful for. Maybe I'm the woman somebody actually chooses." She laughed bitterly. "And then you leave, and I remember I'm just the nice neighbor who watches your kid. And I put myself back together, and I wait, and I mark a stupid calendar like a lovesick teenager, and I hate myself for it a little every single day." The kitchen was completely silent. Daniel stood there, 4 months of exhaustion and 2 years of lies and a lifetime of promises all crashing down at once, and looked at the woman in front of him, the woman who just handed him her whole heart on a broken kitchen floor, knowing full well he might not pick it up. And the third promise, the never again promise, the promise he'd built his entire careful life around, cracked right down the middle. "Olivia," he said. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "Sit down. I have to tell you something, and I've never said it out loud to anyone, and I need you to sit down first." She stared at him. "Please," Daniel said. And slowly, hardly daring to hope, one hand pressed against that chest again like she was holding her own heart in place. Olivia Bennet sat down. Olivia sat, and for a long moment, Daniel couldn't make his mouth work. He'd faced flashovers. He'd crawled through smoke so thick he couldn't see his own gloves. And none of it had ever felt like this, like the floor might open up under him if he said the wrong thing. "When my wife died," he began, and his voice was already unsteady, "I made a promise. To myself. Nobody else ever heard it. I promised I would never love another woman as long as I lived." Olivia's face didn't move, but something behind her eyes flickered and went dim, and Daniel realized she thought he was letting her down easy. "No," he said quickly. "No, that's not. Let me finish. Please, I'm bad at this." "Okay," she whispered. "I made that promise because I was terrified. Not for me, for Ethan. He was 5. He didn't understand where his mom went. He'd wake up at night asking for her, and I'd have to sit on the edge of his bed and tell him she wasn't coming back and watch it break him all over again every single night for months." Daniel's jaw worked. "And I swore to myself I am never going to let him love somebody like that again. Because if I let him get attached and then it ends and she leaves, I'd be handing my kid the worst pain of his life a second time. And I couldn't. I wouldn't. So I decided I'd just be alone. Forever. It was the one thing I could control." Olivia's hands were folded so tight in her lap her knuckles had gone white. "That was a good promise," she said carefully. "That's a good father talking, Daniel. I understand it. I do. You don't have to explain anything to—" "You're not hearing me." He crossed the kitchen and dropped into the chair across from her, close now, close enough to reach her. "Olivia, that promise had a hole in it the size of the sky, and I've spent 2 years refusing to look at it." "What hole?" "He already loves you." The words hit her like a physical thing. He watched her breath catch. "Ethan already loves you," Daniel said again, softer. "It already happened, right under my nose while I was busy telling myself I was protecting him. He talks about you the way he used to talk about—" He stopped, swallowed. "He put your name on a Father's Day card, Olivia, last year. His teacher had them make cards and he didn't have a mother, so he made one for you, and he was too embarrassed to give it to you. So he hid it in my truck, and I found it 3 states away, and I sat in a parking lot, and I couldn't breathe." Now Olivia's eyes were filling again. "He made me a card. He made you a card. And I looked at that card, and I understood that everything I'd built my whole life around the whole never again, the whole keeping him safe, it was already too late. He's already attached. My son already picked you. Years ago. I was the only one still pretending it hadn't happened. Daniel, so here's my confession." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and made himself hold her eyes. "The reason I drove 1,100 miles without stopping. The reason my hands turned the wheel to your house instead of my own. It's the same reason I've been lying to myself since the day you showed up at my door with that casserole and didn't say one single stupid thing." His voice dropped to almost nothing. "It's not just Ethan who's attached, Olivia. It's me. It's been me for a long, long time. And I was too much of a coward to say it, because saying it meant breaking the one promise I had left." The kitchen went so quiet he could hear both their hearts. Olivia opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Say that again," she breathed. "Which part?" "The part where you—" Her voice failed. She pressed her hand to her mouth. "Daniel, if you're saying this because I fell apart on the floor and you feel sorry for me, I need you to stop right now, because I have spent my whole life being the woman men feel sorry for, and I would rather you walk out that door and never say another word to me than have you say something you don't mean out of pity. So look at me and tell me the truth. Is this pity?" "No." "Swear it." "Olivia, I have never been more sure of anything in my life, and I have been to funerals." He reached across the table and took both her hands, and she let him. "It's not pity. It never was. I have watched you get looked at sideways in the grocery store, and I wanted to put my fist through a wall. I have heard people in this neighborhood say things about you that I will not repeat, and every time I wanted to grab them and say, 'Do you have any idea who she is? Do you have any idea that she's the kindest, strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever stood next to, and you're too small to see it." She was crying openly now, but she was smiling too, and it was the most confusing and wonderful expression Daniel had ever seen on a human face. "You think I'm beautiful," she said, like she was testing whether the words would hold weight. "I think you're the most beautiful woman I've ever known. And I've been thinking it for 2 years, and I hate that it took me this long to say it. And I hate that I made you sit in this kitchen and cry over a man who couldn't get out of his own way." For a moment, neither of them moved. Their hands were tangled together on the table, and the timer wasn't going off, and there was no crash of a tray, no interruption, nothing to break the moment this time. And then Olivia pulled her hands back. Daniel's stomach dropped. "Olivia, I can't," she said. "What? I can't do this." She stood up so fast, the chair scraped hard against the floor, and she turned away from him, both hands pressed to her face. "I can't, Daniel. I can't. I'm sorry. Hey." He was up too, moving toward her. "Talk to me. What just happened? A second ago A second ago I forgot," she said, whirling back around, and now there was something desperate in her face, something cornered. "For about 10 seconds I let myself believe it, and then I remembered, and I can't let myself do that to you. Or to Ethan, or to me. Do what, Olivia? You're not making sense." "Sit down." "I don't want to sit down. I want to—" "Sit down, Daniel Carter, because now it's my turn to confess something, and it's going to change how you look at me, and I'd rather you were sitting." Slowly, Daniel sat. Olivia stood in the middle of her kitchen hugging her own arms, and Daniel watched her gather herself the way she always did, except this time, the walls didn't go back up. This time she just stood there undefended and made herself keep going. "You know that company," she said. "The one that's been sniffing around my bakery. The big one, the distribution outfit. They made an offer." She swallowed. 3 days ago, a real one, on paper. "That's Olivia, that's incredible. That's what you've been working toward for. They want to put my recipes in 400 stores. Her voice was hollow. "They want to build a whole line around me. My name, my face, the whole thing. It's more money than I've ever seen. It's the kind of offer you get once if you're lucky, and never again." "Then why do you look like somebody died?" Olivia met his eyes, and hers were bleak. "Because the company's in Oregon," she said. "And they want me there, in person, running product development, standing in test kitchens, flying out to launches. They want me to move, Daniel, 1,400 miles from here, and the offer's only good for 2 weeks, and I have to sign or walk away. And I've been sitting up every night trying to figure out how to tell your son I'm leaving, and now you walk in that door and say all of this and I—" She broke off. She couldn't finish. Daniel felt like the floor had genuinely dropped out from under him. "When did they call you?" he asked quietly. "Tuesday." "And you have 2 weeks." "I have 11 days now." He sat very still. The croissant sat cold on the plate between them. Somewhere outside a car went by, and a dog barked, and life went on for everybody in the world, except the 2 people in that kitchen. "So," Daniel said slowly, "let me make sure I understand this. After 2 years, I finally say the thing I've been too scared to say. And you're telling me you might already be leaving. Now you understand why I fell apart when you knocked," Olivia whispered. "It wasn't just that I missed you. It's that I've been trying to convince myself to take the offer, to go, to finally, for once in my life, choose myself and my dream instead of taking care of everybody else. And I'd almost talked myself into it. I'd almost gotten there. And then you knocked on that door 3 weeks early, and I saw your face and I dropped the tray and I thought—" Her voice cracked. "I thought, of course. Of course he comes home right when I've finally worked up the courage to leave. Of course the universe waits until now." Daniel put his face in his hands. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he lifted his head. "There's something I need to tell you too." "Daniel, no, you don't get to be the only one with a secret." He let out a hard breath. "The department in Candler County, the one over. They offered me a captain's position while I was away. Twice. Better money, better hours, a chance to actually build a program, instead of just running into fires other people started. Olivia frowned. That's good, isn't it? Candler's not far. That's only... It means relocating, selling the house, pulling Ethan out of school. He said it flatly. And I was going to take it, Olivia. I'd almost decided. Before I ever walked in this door today, my plan was to come home, spend a week here, and then tell everybody I was moving my son to another county. She stared at him. Why? Same reason as you, probably. He gave a bitter little laugh. To run. To get out of this town where every corner reminds me of my wife. To stop being the sad widower everybody whispers about. To start over somewhere that didn't have her fingerprints on it. He shook his head slowly. I built this whole story about how it was for Ethan. More money, better future. But it wasn't for Ethan, it was for me. I wanted to run away from a ghost, and I was going to drag my kid along to do it. The irony of it settled over both of them at the same time, and it was almost too much to bear. So look at us, Olivia said, and there was a broken kind of laughter in her voice. You've got 1 foot out the door heading east. I've got 1 foot out the door heading west. And we spend 2 years too scared to say a word to each other. And the day we finally do it, turns out we've both already packed our bags to leave in opposite directions. Yeah, Daniel said. Look at us. And then, because the situation was so absurd and so painful, and so exactly like the kind of thing that always seemed to happen to the two of them, they both started to laugh, a raw, exhausted, half-crying laugh, the kind that comes when a thing hurts too much to do anything else with. It didn't last. What do we do? Olivia asked when it faded. What in the world do we do with this? Daniel didn't have an answer, and before he could pretend, the front door banged open, and a small voice shouted through the house at a volume that could have shattered glass. Olivia, guess what? I got 100 on my spelling test, and Mrs. Patterson said I'm the best in the... Ethan Carter came skidding around the corner into the kitchen, backpack half off one shoulder, and stopped dead. For 1 full second, the boy just stared. Then he made a sound that Daniel would remember for the rest of his life. A high, cracking, disbelieving sound that wasn't quite a word, and threw himself across the kitchen so hard he nearly knocked his father out of the chair. Dad! Hey, buddy. Daniel had him wrapped up before he could think both arms around the boy, and his voice was already gone. Hey, there he is. Hey. There he. You're home, you're home, you're home. You're not supposed to be home till the 28th. I have it circled. I circled it. I know you did. Daniel pressed his face into his son's hair, and he was distantly aware that he was crying now, in front of Olivia, in front of everybody, and for once in his life he did not care, even a little bit. I finished early. I came home early just to see you. You said 3 weeks. On the phone, you said... I lied. I wanted to surprise you. Ethan pulled back just far enough to look his father in the face, and his little chin was wobbling and his eyes were huge and wet, and he said the thing that broke whatever was left of Daniel's composure clean in half. I prayed for it, Ethan said. Every night. I asked God to bring you home early, and I told Olivia I asked, and she said, sometimes it works, and it worked. Dad, it worked. Daniel couldn't answer. He just pulled his son back in and held him, and over the top of the boy's head, his eyes found Olivia's, and she was standing there with both hands pressed to her mouth and tears pouring down her face, watching the two of them. And Daniel knew, he knew with absolute certainty, that there was no version of the future where he took a job in Candler County and pulled this boy away from that woman. And he knew something else too, watching her face. There was no version where he let her get on a plane to Oregon either, but he didn't know yet how to make both of those true at once. Ethan finally let go of his father and turned to Olivia, and without a shred of self-consciousness, he wrapped his arms around her waist too and squeezed. Olivia, did you know? Did you know Dad was coming home early? I did not know, Olivia said, laughing through her tears, smoothing his hair. He scared me half to death. I dropped a whole tray of bread. She dropped a whole tray, Ethan reported to his father, delighted. Dad, You scared her so bad, she dropped the bread." "I heard," Daniel said. "I'll buy her new bread." "You can't buy her bread. She makes the bread, that's the whole thing." And just like that, for a few minutes, the impossible weight of it all lifted, and the three of them were just a father and a son, and the woman who loved them both, standing in a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon, and it felt so much like a family that Daniel's chest physically ached with it. Which is exactly why what happened next hurt so much. Because Ethan, still riding the high of it, still buzzing, looked up at Olivia with total innocence and said, "Olivia, now that Dad's home, can we still have Tuesday dinners? All three of us, like a family, even when Dad's not working?" And Daniel watched Olivia's face crumble. She caught it fast. She was good at catching it, but not fast enough, and the boy was too sharp not to notice. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked immediately. "Why do you look sad? Olivia, why are you sad?" "I'm not sad, baby," Olivia said, kneeling down to his level, and her voice was so gentle and so heartbroken that Daniel had to look away. "I'm the opposite of sad. I'm so happy your dad's home." "Then why are you crying?" "Because sometimes people cry when they're happy. You know that. You just did it." Ethan considered this unconvinced, and Daniel could see the exact moment the boy's radar decided something was wrong and wasn't going to let it go. He got that from his mother. She'd never let anything go either. "Are you moving?" Ethan asked. The kitchen went dead silent. Olivia's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Grace's mom said she heard you might be moving?" Ethan pressed his voice, climbing. "She said a big company wants you and you might go far away. I said she was lying. I said Olivia would never move away." "Tell her she's lying, Olivia." Olivia looked up at Daniel, stricken, pleading, "Help me do something. I don't know what to say." And Daniel understood that this was the moment. This was the fork in the road. Whatever he said in the next 5 seconds was going to shape all three of their lives. He knelt down next to his son. "Ethan," he said, "look at me, bud." The boy turned, and his lower lip was already trembling. "Sometimes grown-ups get offered a big chance to do something amazing," Daniel said, choosing every word like he was walking across ice. "A chance that only comes once. And Olivia got offered a chance like that, because she's so good at what she does that a big company all the way in another state noticed. That's how talented she is. That's how special she is. But she's not going to take it." Ethan's voice was shaking now. Right, Dad. She's not going to—" "I don't know yet," Daniel said honestly, and it cost him everything to say it. "It's her decision. It's a really big, really important decision, and it's hers to make, and it wouldn't be fair for you or me to try and make it for her. But I don't want her to go." And now the dam broke, and the boy was crying, really crying the way he used to cry at night for his mother. "I don't want her to go. Dad, I don't want her to leave too. Everybody leaves. Mom left and you left, and now Olivia's gonna leave. Hey, 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 hey." Daniel pulled him in, but the boy was inconsolable, and every sob was a blade going straight through both adults in the room. "Everybody leaves," Ethan wailed into his father's shirt. "Everybody always leaves." And Olivia Bennett, who had spent her entire life being the one who stayed, the one who gave, the one who took care of everyone else while quietly falling apart, looked at that broken little boy, sobbing that everybody leaves, and something in her face changed. Daniel saw it happen. He saw the exact instant the decision started forming, and it scared him because he wasn't sure it was the right one for her. "Ethan," Olivia said. The boy kept crying. "Ethan, baby, look at me." He lifted his blotchy, tear-streaked face. "I need you to listen to me very carefully, okay? Because I'm going to tell you something true, and I only want to say it once." She wiped his cheeks with her thumbs. "I am not going anywhere tonight. Do you hear me? I'm right here. I'm not on a plane. I'm not in a truck. I'm standing in my kitchen with my two favorite people in the whole world. Tonight, nobody's leaving anybody. But tomorrow we'll figure out together. All of us. Nobody's going to disappear on you, Ethan. That's a promise, and I don't break promises. Not to you. Never to you." She pulled him into a hug, and he collapsed into her, and over his shoulder, her eyes met Daniel's, and what he saw in them terrified him. Because he'd seen that look before. On himself. It was the look of a person about to sacrifice their own dream to protect someone they loved. And Daniel Carter knew right then that if he let her do it, if he let her turn down the offer of a lifetime to keep his son from crying, he'd be doing to Olivia the exact thing every man in her life had ever done. He'd be a man she gave everything to, a man she rearranged herself around, a man for whom she folded up her own future and put it in a drawer. He would be making her small, and he would not do that to her. Not even to keep his own son from hurting. Not even to keep her close. The realization landed on him like a collapsing roof. He was going to have to do the hardest thing he'd ever done. He was going to have to look the woman he loved in the eye on the very same day he'd finally admitted he loved her and tell her to consider leaving. "Olivia," he said, and his voice was rough as gravel. "Can I talk to you outside, just for a minute?" She looked up surprised. Ethan can play his game on my phone for 5 minutes. Can't you, bud?" Ethan, sniffling, took the offered phone like it was made of gold because he was rarely allowed it. For real, 5 minutes. Then we're all going to have dinner." Daniel stood and looked at Olivia. "Please." She hesitated. Then she stood too and followed him toward the front of the house, and the second they were far enough that the boy couldn't hear, Daniel turned around. "Don't do it," he said. Olivia blinked. "Don't do what?" "Don't turn it down for him. Don't turn it down for me. Don't you dare." Her face hardened. "Daniel, I saw your face in there. I know that look because I've worn it. You just decided, didn't you? You just decided you're going to call that company tomorrow and tell them no because a little boy cried in your kitchen and you can't stand to be the one who makes him hurt." He shook his head hard. "I won't let you. You won't let me." And now there was heat in her voice, real anger, the first he'd ever seen from her. "You don't get a vote, Daniel. It's my life. It's my decision. You said so yourself 5 minutes ago to your son. It's mine to make. It is yours to make, and I'm begging you to make it for the right reason." He stepped closer and his voice dropped and it shook. "Olivia, you have spent your whole life taking care of other people. You told me that yourself an hour ago right in that kitchen. Men who used you as a shoulder. People who appreciated you and left. A whole town that overlooked you. And now, the one time the world hands you something that's yours, that's for you, that could make everything you've worked for real. You're going to give it up for us, so we can keep having Tuesday dinners." "Maybe I want the Tuesday dinners more than I want Oregon." "You don't get to decide that in a panic while a kid's crying." Daniel's voice cracked. "That's not a decision, that's a reflex. That's the same reflex that's had you putting everybody else first your entire life, and I will not be one more person who takes advantage of it. I love you too much to be that guy." The words were out before he could stop them. "I love you." They both heard it. They both froze. Olivia's anger drained out of her all at once, and she stood there in her own front hallway, staring at the man who'd just said the words she'd waited her whole life to hear. And for a moment, she looked like she didn't know whether to laugh or scream or fall down. "You can't do that," she whispered. "Do what?" "Say that. Say that right now and then, in the same breath, tell me to get on a plane." "You can't. Daniel, you can't say you love me and tell me to leave. That's not fair. That's the cruelest thing anyone's ever done to me, and you don't even know you're doing it. I'm not telling you to leave." He reached for her hands, and this time, she didn't let him take them, and that hurt more than he expected. "I'm telling you to choose. Freely. With a clear head. Not because a boy cried, not because I finally grew a spine and said how I feel, not because you're scared or guilty or trying to protect anybody. I want you to look at that offer, and look at me, and look at Ethan, and choose whatever's actually right for you. And whatever you choose, you'll what?" Her voice was barely there. "You'll wait. You'll follow. You'll let me go. What, Daniel? Finish the sentence." And that was the thing. He couldn't finish it, because he didn't know. He didn't know if he could pack up his son and move to Oregon and start over in a place where he had no job, no house, no plan. He didn't know if he could stand at an airport and watch her walk through security and out of their lives. He didn't know if long distance could survive 1,400 miles and a firefighter's schedule, and a little boy who already believed everybody leaves. He didn't know anything except that he loved her, and that loving her meant he could not be one more person who made her small. "I don't know how the sentence ends," he admitted. "I only know I'm not going to be the reason you spend the rest of your life wondering what if. I've spent 2 years wondering what if about you, and it nearly cost me everything. I won't put that on you, I won't." Olivia stared at him for a long moment. Her eyes were wet, but her face had gone strangely calm, the calm of someone standing at the edge of something. "You really mean that?" she said. "You'd actually let me go?" "I'd hate every second of it, but yes. Even though your son just told me everybody leaves, even though he sobbed it into your shirt, you'd still tell me to consider getting on that plane." "Because I love you," Daniel said, "more than I want you to stay." And that sentence, the one he could finish, landed in the space between them and changed something. He watched it happen. He watched Olivia Bennett hear a man say, "I love you more than I want you to stay." And he watched her understand, maybe for the first time in her whole life, that she was standing in front of someone whose love did not come with a leash. She started to cry again, but it was different this time. It wasn't the desperate cornered crying from the kitchen. It was something quieter and deeper and almost like relief. "Do you have any idea," she said, "that no one has ever in my entire life told me to choose myself? Then it's about time somebody did. You're supposed to fight for me. In the movies, the man fights for the woman. He begs her to stay. I'm not going to beg you to stay, Olivia. Begging you to stay would be about me. This is about you." He took a breath. "But don't mistake me. I am fighting for you. Telling you to choose yourself, that is me fighting for you. It's just the only kind of fighting that's actually worth a damn." For a long moment, Olivia said nothing. Then very slowly, she reached out and took his hands, the ones she'd refused a minute before. And she held them, and she looked down at them, at his rough firefighter's hands wrapped around her flour-dusted ones, and she said something so quietly, he almost missed it. "I've never been so scared in my life. Of the decision. Of you." She looked up. "Of the fact that I believe you. Of the fact that for the first time ever, I'm standing in front of a man who I actually completely believe would let me fly away if that's what was best for me. And it makes me want to do the exact opposite. It makes me want to never leave your side. Do you understand how backwards that is? You gave me permission to go, and it made me want to stay." "That's not backwards," Daniel said. "That's just what it feels like when somebody loves you the right way." Olivia laughed, wet and shaky and real, and pressed her forehead against his chest, and for a moment they just stood there in the hallway holding on. And then from the kitchen, a small voice called out, "Are you guys done being sad yet? Can we eat? I beat the level." They pulled apart, both of them, wiping their faces, both of them half laughing. "Yeah, buddy," Daniel called back, his voice thick. "We're done. Come on, let's eat." But they weren't done. Not really. Because nothing had been decided. Olivia still had 11 days and an offer in Oregon. Daniel still had a captain's job waiting in Candler County and a house full of a dead woman's memories. Ethan still believed deep in the marrow of him that everybody leaves. And as the three of them sat down at Olivia's little kitchen table, as she reheated a dinner she'd made for one and stretched it into a dinner for three, the way she'd done 100 times before, Daniel looked around at the two people he loved most in the world and felt the ground shifting under all of them. Something was going to have to give. Somebody was going to have to make a choice that broke their own heart to save the others. And Daniel had the sick, certain feeling watching Olivia laugh at something Ethan said, watching her wipe a smear of sauce off the boy's cheek with the automatic tenderness of a mother that she'd already decided which of them it was going to be. He just didn't yet know how far she was willing to go to protect the two of them from herself. That night, after Ethan had fallen asleep on Olivia's couch, mid-sentence, worn out from crying and joy, and a full stomach, Daniel carried his boy out to the truck to take him home. Olivia walked them to the door. "Thank you for dinner," Daniel said. "And for the last 4 months. And for—" He shook his head. "For everything. There isn't a word big enough." Daniel. Olivia stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself against the evening cool, and there was something final in her voice that made his stomach clench. "Whatever happens, however this shakes out, I need you to know something. Okay. Today was the best day of my life, even with all of it. All the crying and the fear and the impossible math of it. You knocked on my door and you told me you loved me, and my whole life I never thought I'd hear a good man say that and mean it." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were shining. "So thank you for giving me that, no matter what I decide." And something in the way she said it, "no matter what I decide," landed cold in Daniel's chest. "Olivia," he said slowly, "what did you decide?" She smiled at him. It was a beautiful smile. It was also, he realized with a lurch of pure dread, a goodbye. "Get that boy home to bed," she said. "It's late." "Olivia." "Good night, Daniel." And she stepped back and she closed the door, and Daniel stood on her porch in the dark with his sleeping son in his arms, staring at the pale yellow house with the flower boxes in every window, understanding that somewhere behind that door, in the space of one perfect, terrible day, the woman he loved had made a decision. He just had no idea yet that it was the exact opposite of the one he was afraid of. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He lay awake in his own bed for the first time in 4 months, in a house that smelled like dust and absence, listening to his son breathe in the next room, and he kept seeing that smile, that final beautiful goodbye smile. He kept hearing those 4 words. "No matter what I decide." By 4 in the morning, he'd convinced himself he knew what she'd chosen. She was going to Oregon. She'd decided it standing in that kitchen doorway, and she'd wrapped it in a thank you so she could deliver it kindly. She was going to take the offer, chase the dream, get on a plane, and be brave and free, and finally chosen by the whole world instead of overlooked by one small town. And he'd told her to. He'd stood in her hallway and told her to choose herself. So why did it feel like he'd handed her the knife and pointed it at his own chest? At 6, he heard her ovens. He knew that sound, the way he knew his own heartbeat now. The low mechanical hum through the wall between their houses, the sound of Olivia Bennett starting her day before the rest of the world had rolled over. 4 months away, and he'd forgotten how much comfort was in it. She was awake, she was baking, she was still here. For now. He got up. He made Ethan breakfast, walked him to the bus, watched him climb on, still buzzing about his father being home, still telling every kid in earshot. And the second that bus pulled away, Daniel turned and walked straight across the 2 front lawns to the pale yellow house and knocked on the door before he could talk himself out of it. She opened it in her apron flower on her forearms, and she wasn't surprised to see him. That was the first thing he noticed. She'd been expecting him. "You didn't sleep," she said. "Neither did you." "No." She stepped back to let him in. "Coffee's on. Sit down before you fall down. You look like a ghost." He sat. She poured. And for a minute, neither of them said anything, and the not saying was so loud it hurt. "Just tell me," Daniel finally said. "I've been up all night guessing. Just tell me what you decided, because I can't take the guessing anymore." Olivia set down her own cup very carefully. "I called them this morning," she said. "The company. At 5 a.m., their time, 6 mine. I couldn't wait. I've been sitting on it for 4 days and I couldn't hold it 1 more hour." Daniel's stomach dropped straight through the floor. And I told them yes." The word landed like a punch. Daniel didn't move. He kept his face very still, the way he did on the worst calls, the ones where showing what you felt would help nobody. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay. Good. That's Olivia, that's good. I'm happy for you. I mean it. That's the right—" "I'm not finished." He looked up. "I told them yes," Olivia said, "on one condition. And I told them if they couldn't meet it, then the answer was no, and I'd hang up the phone and never think about it again." "What condition?" She sat down across from him. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup like she needed to hold on to something warm. "I told them I'm not moving to Oregon," she said. "I told them I'll develop their whole product line. I'll create every recipe. I'll do the launches, I'll do the press, I'll fly out 4 times a year for whatever they need. But I keep my bakery, I keep my house, I keep my life right here. And they build the distribution around me instead of around their zip code." She took a breath. "I told them I've spent my whole life leaving pieces of myself in places to make other people comfortable, and I'm done. If they want what I make, they get it on my terms in my town, or they don't get it at all." Daniel could barely breathe. "And they said no." "What?" "At first." A small, fierce smile touched her mouth. "They said the model doesn't work that way. They need me on site, it's non-negotiable. And I said, all right, then we don't have a deal, thank you for your time, and I hung up on them." "You hung up on I hung up on the biggest offer of my life, Daniel." Her eyes were bright now, alive in a way he'd never seen. "And you know what happened? They called back in 90 minutes, and they said fine. They said they'd figure out the logistics. They said in 20 years nobody had ever turned them down like that, and they'd rather adapt their model than lose me." She laughed, disbelieving, a little giddy. "They adapted. For me. Because I said no." Daniel sat there with his mouth slightly open, and something enormous and warm was rising up through the wreckage of his sleepless dread. "So you're staying," he said slowly, needing to hear himself say it. "I'm staying." "You're not getting on a plane." "I'm not getting on a plane. I'm getting the dream and the Tuesday dinners. Both. All of it." Her voice cracked. "For the first time in my whole life, I didn't fold, Daniel. I didn't make myself small so somebody else could have the shape they wanted. I sat there with the thing I've worked for my entire life on the table, and I said I want it, and I want my life, and I refused to choose. And I won." Daniel was on his feet before he knew he'd stood up. He crossed the kitchen, and he pulled her out of her chair, and he wrapped her up so hard she squeaked, and he buried his face in her hair, and he was laughing, and something dangerously close to crying all at once. "You did that," he said into her hair. "You did that. Do you understand what you just did? You didn't wait for anybody to save you. You didn't wait for me to figure out my sentence. You saved your own self, Olivia." "I almost didn't." Her voice was muffled against his chest. "I almost called them back and said, never mind, I'll move whatever you want." My finger was on the button. "And then I thought about what you said in the hallway, that you loved me more than you wanted me to stay. And I thought if he can love me that much, if he can be that brave, then the least I can do is be that brave for myself." She pulled back and looked up at him. "You gave me that, Daniel. You standing in that hallway telling me to choose myself. That's the thing that let me pick up the phone and refuse to fold. I couldn't have done it without you telling me I was allowed to." And Daniel, who'd spent all night believing he'd talked the woman he loved onto a plane out of his life, understood that the exact opposite had happened. By setting her free, he'd given her the strength to stay on her own terms. He kissed her. He hadn't planned to. It just happened. She was looking up at him with her whole heart wide open, and 2 years of wanting collapsed into a single second, and he kissed her, and she kissed him back, like she'd been waiting 6 years for exactly this, which she had. When they finally broke apart, both a little breathless, Olivia laughed against his mouth. "Took you long enough?" she whispered. "I'm a slow learner." "You're a very slow learner. I'm going to spend a long time making up for it if you'll let me." She went still at that. Her hands were on his chest, and she looked up at him, and something flickered across her face, some shadow he couldn't name. "Daniel," she said, "there's something I still have to tell you, and it's not about Oregon. It's the other thing. The thing I almost said yesterday in the kitchen before the timer went off. The thing I've never told anybody." The warmth in the room shifted just slightly. "Okay," he said carefully. "Tell me." She stepped back out of his arms, not rejecting him, just needing the space to say it, and she wrapped her arms around herself the way she did when she was bracing. "You know I've been alone a long time," she said. You know, men in my life never stuck around. But you don't know why. You think it's because they were shallow. Because they couldn't see past. She gestured at herself, this. And that's part of it. But it's not the whole story. Then tell me the whole story. Olivia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice had gone somewhere far away. 7 years ago, I was engaged, she said. Daniel didn't move. His name was Marcus, and he was God, he was everything on paper. Handsome, successful, said all the right things. And I couldn't believe he'd picked me. Somebody like him picking somebody like me. I spent the whole relationship waiting for him to realize his mistake. She laughed, but it had no humor in it. We were 3 weeks from the wedding. Dress bought, venue paid for, my mother crying happy tears every time she looked at me. And I found out he'd been seeing someone else the entire time. The entire time, Daniel. 2 years. Olivia, that's not even the part that broke me. She kept going, and her voice was steadier now in the flat way that means the wound is old and deep. The part that broke me was when I confronted him. When I stood there with the evidence and asked him why. And he looked at me, this man I'd loved for 2 years, this man I was about to marry, and he said, she stopped, swallowed. He said, you were never supposed to be forever live. You were the safe one, the comfortable one, the one who'd never leave. She's the one I actually wanted. You were just... Olivia's voice finally broke. You were just where I rested until I got her. The kitchen was dead silent. Daniel felt something cold and murderous move through him, and he had to breathe through it before he could speak. He said that to you, Daniel said. Very quietly. Very dangerously. He said that to me, and then he married her. I got the invitation, if you can believe it. Someone thought it would be funny. She wiped her eyes fast. And that was the day I decided I understood my place in the world. I was the safe one, the comfortable one, the one people rested with until something better came along. Never the one somebody actually wanted. Never the one somebody chose. She looked up at him, and her eyes were raw. So when you knocked on my door yesterday and told me you loved me, do you understand why I fell apart? Do you understand why I couldn't believe it? Because the last time a man told me he loved me, he meant until I find someone better. And I have spent 7 years absolutely certain down in my bones that that's the only kind of love a woman like me ever gets. Daniel crossed the kitchen. He took her face in both his hands gently, and he made her look at him. Listen to me, he said. Are you listening? She nodded, tears spilling over his thumbs. You are not the one I rest with until something better comes along. His voice was low and fierce and absolutely certain. You are the something better. Do you hear me? You're not the safe choice. You're not the comfortable choice. You're not the one I settle for. You are the best thing that has ever walked into my life besides my son, and if that dead-hearted coward couldn't see that, then thank God, because it means he left you here for me to find. Olivia made a sound like a sob and a laugh tangled together. You can't just say the perfect thing, she whispered. It's not fair. It's not perfect. It is just true. He pressed his forehead to hers. Olivia, I have known you for 2 years. 2 years of watching you take care of my kid, take care of this whole neighborhood, take care of everybody but yourself. I know exactly who you are. I'm not falling for a first impression. I'm not resting. I'm not settling. I have had 2 years to change my mind, and I have only ever fallen harder. You are not anybody's safe choice. You're my whole heart. And I was too scared to say it, and I'm done being scared. For a moment, she just breathed him in. 7 years, she whispered. 7 years I believed I was somebody's resting place. And you undid it. In 4 sentences. I'll undo it every day for the rest of my life if that's what it takes. And that's when the front door opened without a knock, and a voice neither of them expected called out into the house. Olivia, sweetheart, I let myself in. I hope that's... An older woman rounded the corner into the kitchen and stopped dead at the sight of Daniel, with his hands on Olivia's face, both of them tear-streaked and standing much too close. "Oh," the woman said. Olivia jumped back like she'd been electrocuted. "Mom?" Daniel's stomach dropped for the second time that morning. "Mom, what are you're supposed to be in Florida till—" "I flew back early. I have news I wanted to tell you in person." Olivia's mother, a small, sharp-eyed woman with Olivia's exact face aged 30 years, was looking back and forth between the two of them with an expression Daniel couldn't read at all. "Clearly, I've interrupted something." "This is Daniel," Olivia said, flustered, wiping her face. "Daniel Carter, from next door, the firefighter, Ethan's father. I've told you about—" "Oh, I know exactly who Daniel Carter is," the older woman said. And something in the way she said it made the hair on the back of Daniel's neck stand up. "Mrs. Bennett," Daniel started, extending his hand. "It's a real pleasure to finally—" "You're the one she cries over," Olivia's mother said flatly, ignoring his hand. "Mom, what he's standing right here with his hands all over your face, I think we're past pretending." She fixed Daniel with a stare that could have stripped paint. 2 years I've watched my daughter light up every time your name comes up and go dark every time you leave. 2 years I've listened to her talk herself out of hoping because the last man who—" She stopped herself. "Well, you probably don't know about the last man. I just told him, Mom." Olivia's voice was quiet. "All of it. Marcus. Everything." That stopped the older woman cold. She looked at her daughter with genuine surprise. "You told him about Marcus. You've never told anyone about Marcus. You wouldn't even tell your own sister the real reason the wedding got—" "I know." "And you told him—" "I told him." Olivia's mother turned and looked at Daniel again, and this time the paint-stripping stare had softened into something searching. Something almost hopeful, buried under years of watching her daughter get hurt. "Then let me ask you something, Mr. Carter," she said. "And I want you to think very carefully before you answer, because I have spent 7 years watching my daughter believe she's worth less than she is, and I am not going to stand here and watch another man teach her that lesson again. So—" She crossed her arms. "What exactly are your intentions with my daughter?" "Mom, you can't just—" "I most certainly can. I'm 63 years old, and I flew 4 hours on a middle seat. I'll ask whatever I want." She didn't take her eyes off Daniel. Well, and Daniel, who had walked into burning buildings, who had faced down a wildfire, who had sat with dying strangers and held their hands, looked Olivia's mother dead in the eye, and said the truest thing he'd ever said in his life. "My intention," he said, "is to spend the rest of my life making sure your daughter never for one single day forgets that she was chosen. Not settled for. Chosen. First. Best. On purpose. I intend to marry her if she'll have me, though I haven't asked yet, and I'm making a mess of it right now in front of her mother, which is not how I planned it. And I intend to raise my son to know that the woman who taught him what love looks like is the woman his father was smart enough to love back." He didn't break eye contact once. "Those are my intentions, ma'am. And I'll be having them for the rest of my life whether I get your blessing or not. But I would very much like to have your blessing." The kitchen was completely silent. Olivia had both hands pressed over her mouth. Her mother was staring at Daniel like she was trying to see through to the back of his skull, checking for the lie. She didn't find one. Slowly, the older woman's chin began to tremble. 7 years, she said, and her voice had gone thick. 7 years I've prayed somebody would look at my girl and see what I see. Do you know what it's like to watch your child decide she's not worth loving? To watch her turn down date after date because she's so sure she's just going to be somebody's resting place again. To watch her pour every ounce of love she has into other people's children because she's convinced she'll never— The woman's voice broke completely. I've been so scared she'd be alone forever, and that it would be that coward Marcus who did that to her, that he'd get to be the last word on what my daughter's worth. He doesn't get to be the last word, Daniel said quietly. I promise you that. He doesn't get to be the last word on anything ever again. And Olivia's mother, this sharp, fierce, paint-stripping woman, walked across the kitchen and put her arms around Daniel Carter and held on and cried into the shirt of a man she'd met 90 seconds ago because he'd just promised to undo 7 years of her daughter's pain. Over the top of her mother's head, Daniel's eyes met Olivia's. She was looking at him like the whole world had just tilted on its axis. Like something she'd stopped letting herself want had just walked into her kitchen and made itself real. "You said, Mary," Olivia whispered. Her mother pulled back, sniffling, wiping her eyes, suddenly all business again. "He did say Mary. I heard it clear as day. There's a witness now. You can't take it back." "I don't want to take it back," Daniel said. "Well, don't propose now," the older woman snapped, swatting his arm. "You've known you love her out loud for what a day. Give the girl a proper proposal for heaven's sake. You can't do it in a kitchen with her mother standing here in yesterday's travel clothes. Have some sense." And just like that, the tension broke and all three of them were laughing. The wet, overflowing, relieved kind of laughing. And Daniel thought his chest might actually crack open with how full it was. But the fullness didn't last because Olivia's mother wasn't done, and what she said next dropped the temperature in the room by 20 degrees. "Now," she said, settling into a chair, pouring herself coffee like she owned the place. "I flew back early for a reason, and it wasn't to catch you two making eyes. Olivia, sit down. This is the news." Olivia sat still, glowing, still half in the clouds. "What news, Mom?" Her mother's face changed. The joy drained out of it, and something older and heavier moved in. "I saw a doctor in Florida," she said. "That's why I really went down there. Not for the vacation. I've been having some symptoms. For a while now. Longer than I told you." Olivia went absolutely still. "Mom, now don't you look at me like that. I'm not dying tomorrow." The older woman waved a hand, but her voice had lost all its sharpness. "But it's not nothing either. There are going to be treatments, appointments, a lot of them. And I'm going to need help, and I didn't want to tell you over the phone. And I certainly didn't want to tell you." She glanced at Daniel. "The same morning you finally got the thing I've prayed you'd get for 7 years. The timing is terrible. It's always terrible. That's how it works." Olivia had gone white. "Mom, what did the doctor say? Exactly. Tell me exactly." "We'll talk about the exactly later. Right now I just needed you to know it's coming. Because—" The woman's composure finally cracked just slightly. "Because I'm scared, Olivia. And you're the only family I've got, and I flew back 4 hours to not be scared alone." And Daniel watched Olivia Bennett, who had just won the fight of her life, who had refused to fold, who had finally been chosen, reach across the table and take her mother's hand. And he saw the old reflex come roaring back into her eyes. The reflex to give everything, to take care of everyone, to pour herself out for the people she loved until there was nothing left. Except this time, it wasn't a reflex he wanted to talk her out of. This time, it was her mother. "I'm here," Olivia said. "Mom, look at me. I'm not going anywhere. I made sure of that this morning. I'm right here, and I'm going to be right here for every single appointment. And you are not going to be scared alone. Not for 1 minute. Do you hear me?" Her mother nodded, tears streaming. And Daniel understood, watching them, that the story wasn't over. That the fight to make Olivia choose herself wasn't a thing you won once and filed away. That life was going to keep handing this woman reasons to fold sick mothers and crying children, and the 10,000 small demands that fell on the shoulders of people too kind to say no. And that his job from here on out wasn't to save her. It was to stand beside her and make sure that every time she poured herself out for someone she loved, somebody was pouring right back into her. He reached over and put his hand on top of both of theirs, Olivia's and her mother's, stacked together on the kitchen table. "You've got 2 of us now," Daniel said quietly. "Whatever's coming. She's not doing it alone, and neither are you. There's 2 of us now. 3 if you count Ethan, and believe me, that kid counts double." Olivia's mother looked up at him, and whatever last piece of doubt had been hiding in her eyes finally let go. "Marcus," she said with sudden savage clarity, "was a fool." "Yes, ma'am," Daniel agreed. "He was. You're going to marry my daughter. Yes, ma'am. When I do it right. Soon. Mom, I'm sick. I'm allowed to rush people. She squeezed both their hands. Soon Daniel Carter. And Daniel looked at Olivia, at the woman he'd loved in silence for 2 years, who'd just won her dream and kept her home, and told him the secret that had shaped her whole life, whose mother was sick, and whose heart was cracked wide open, and who was somehow impossibly glowing anyway. And he made her a silent promise right there across the kitchen table, the kind he never broke. Soon. The next 3 months were the hardest and the best of Olivia Bennett's life, and they came at her all at once. Her mother's treatment started 2 weeks after that morning in the kitchen. Olivia rearranged her entire world around them without hesitation, the way she'd always rearranged herself around the people she loved. But this time, something was different, and the difference had a name. And the name was Daniel Carter. Because every single appointment he was there. Not always in the room. Sometimes in the waiting room with Ethan. Sometimes just in the parking lot with 2 coffees when they came out. But there. And on the mornings, Olivia couldn't be in 2 places at once. Couldn't run the bakery and drive her mother and develop a product line for a company 1,400 miles away. Daniel figured out how to be the second place. He learned to open the bakery. Badly at first. He set off the smoke alarm twice, and once put salt where sugar went, and sold a dozen tragically savory cinnamon rolls to unsuspecting customers before Olivia caught it. "You are banned from the recipes," she told him, laughing, the morning of the salt incident. "Banned. You can work the register. You can carry things. You cannot be trusted near the sugar. I ran into a burning building last week and pulled out a family of 4. And I'm very proud of you, and you still can't tell salt from sugar. And Mrs. Harrison is out there right now making a face like she bit into the ocean." He'd never been happier to be bad at something. Her mother's diagnosis, when the full picture came in, was serious but not hopeless. A word that started treatments and appointments, and a long road, but a road with a light at the end of it if they fought hard enough. And they fought. All of them. Ethan started drawing pictures for Grandma Ruth. That's what he'd started calling her entirely on his own, and the first time he said it, the old woman had to leave the room so nobody would see her cry. He taped the drawings to the wall by her chair, and every time a new one went up, Ruth would study it like it was hanging in a museum. That boy, Ruth told Olivia one afternoon watching Ethan carefully tape a crayon firefighter next to a crayon baker, is the grandchild I was scared I'd never get. You know that? When you called off the wedding, I thought, well, there goes that. There goes ever being anybody's grandma. She shook her head. And now I've got that little tornado calling me Grandma Ruth and drawing me pictures. And I've got a firefighter who can't tell salt from sugar treating me like his own mother. And I got sick just in time to have all of it. Life's a strange thing, Olivia. Mom, don't talk like... I'm not talking like anything. I'm telling you I'm grateful. There's a difference. Ruth patted her daughter's hand. Now go take that man his coffee before he sells somebody another salt roll. 6 weeks in on a Tuesday, because everything important in their lives seemed to happen on Tuesdays, now Daniel finally did it right. He'd been planning it for a month. He'd asked Ethan for help, which was maybe the best decision he made in the whole thing, because Ethan attacked the project with the ferocity of a general planning an invasion. The boy had opinions, strong ones. He rejected 3 ring designs and 2 speeches, and absolutely insisted that it happen in the bakery because that's where Olivia's heart is. Dad, everybody knows that. So on that Tuesday evening, after close, Daniel arranged for Ruth to keep Olivia busy with some invented crisis about the product line paperwork while he and Ethan snuck into the bakery. And when Olivia walked in, tired and flour-dusted and complaining about paperwork that didn't exist, she found her whole bakery lit up with every candle Daniel and Ethan could find, and her mother sitting in the corner with her phone already recording, and Daniel Carter down on one knee on the floor of the place she'd built with her own 2 hands, and her son Ethan, 8 years old, gap-toothed and vibrating with the importance of it, standing next to his father holding the ring box open with both hands like it contained the crown jewels. Olivia stopped in the doorway and made a sound that wasn't a word. "Olivia Bennett," Daniel said, and his voice was already shaking, all his firefighter's steadiness gone. 2 years ago, you showed up at my door with a casserole and didn't say one single stupid thing. And I've been falling in love with you every day since, and I was too much of a coward to say it, and I almost let you slip away not once, but about 6 different times, because I'm slow, and I'm scared, and I make mistakes." He had to stop and breathe. "But I'm not scared anymore. I want the Tuesday dinners. I want the bad days and the salt rolls and the doctor's appointments and every single thing that comes. I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget for 1 second that you were chosen. First, best, on purpose." "Dad, you're forgetting the part," Ethan whispered loudly. "I'm getting to it, bud." "Okay, but don't forget the part." Ethan. "Okay." Daniel looked back up at Olivia, whose hands were pressed over her mouth, whose whole body was shaking, whose eyes had turned into 2 overflowing rivers. "There's one more thing," Daniel said. "And this part isn't from me. This part Ethan made me promise to let him say. Go ahead, bud." And Ethan Carter, still holding the ring box with both hands, looked up at the only mother he could really remember and delivered the speech he'd practiced for 3 weeks in the bathroom mirror. "Olivia," Ethan said very seriously, "I know you're not my real mom. My real mom died when I was little, and I don't remember her that good. But you make my snacks, and you help my homework, and you circle the days on the calendar with me, and you never leave, even when everybody else leaves. You never do." His little voice wobbled. "So I asked my dad if when he marries you, that means you get to be my mom for real. And he said yes. And I said good. Because I already been calling you my mom in my head for a really long time." He held the ring box out an inch further. "So will you please marry my dad and be my mom for real?" There was not a dry eye in that bakery. Ruth was openly sobbing in the corner phone, shaking so badly the video would be nearly unusable. Daniel had given up entirely on holding it together. And Olivia Bennett, who for 32 years had believed she was the resting place, the comfortable one, the woman. Nobody chose the one a man named Marcus had once told was only good until something better came along. Stood in the doorway of the bakery she'd built from nothing, and looked at the man on his knees and the boy with the ring, and understood that she had, without ever seeing it coming, become the something better. The best, the chosen. The first pick, not the fallback. "Yes," she said, and it came out cracked and barely audible, so she said it again louder, laughing and crying at once. "Yes, yes, of course, yes, both of you, yes." And then Ethan whooped and threw the ring box in the air. Daniel caught it one-handed, a genuine miracle, and the boy tackled Olivia around the waist, and Daniel got up off his knee and wrapped both of them up together, and in the corner, Ruth was crying and laughing and narrating to the phone. She said yes, are you getting this? I don't know if I'm getting this. And for a moment everything was perfect, which is exactly why the letter, when it came, hit so hard. It arrived 8 days later on a gray Thursday, in an envelope Olivia almost threw out with the junk mail because she didn't recognize the return address. She was at the bakery counter, sorting the day's mail between customers, when she slid it open one-handed and started reading. And Daniel, who was working the register, banned as ever from the sugar, watched the color drain out of her face in real time. "Olivia." She didn't answer. She kept reading. "Olivia, what is it?" She set the letter down on the counter very slowly, like it might detonate. Her hands were trembling. "It's from Marcus," she said. The name landed in the bakery like a dropped plate. Daniel came around the counter fast. "What does he want?" "He wants—" Olivia laughed, but there was no humor in it, only shock. "He wants to see me. He says he heard I'm engaged. He says he's been doing a lot of thinking. He says his marriage ended 2 years ago, and he's realized he made the biggest mistake of his life." Her voice climbed higher, thinner. "He says he never stopped thinking about me. He says he wants to meet just to talk, just to say some things he should have said 7 years ago. He signed it." She looked like she might be sick. "He signed it, the one who let you go." Well, Daniel picked up the letter, read it himself, and a slow, cold anger built in his chest, the controlled kind, the kind he'd learned to use instead of losing. "He heard you're happy," Daniel said quietly, "and he wants to come put his hand back on it. He waited 7 years. Olivia's voice was shaking. 7 years of nothing. Not a word. Not a call. He married her, Daniel. He stood at an altar and married the woman he cheated on me with, and I got the invitation. And now that I'm finally okay, now that somebody actually wants me, now he shows up. Now, that's exactly how it works. Daniel set the letter down. Guys like Marcus don't want a person, Olivia. They want the winning. You were only worth having again the second somebody else valued you. He didn't miss you for 7 years. He missed you the second he heard the word engaged. Olivia stared at the letter, and Daniel watched something happen on her face that scared him more than tears would have. She went quiet, thoughtful, far away. Olivia, he said carefully, talk to me. What's going on in your head right now? I want to see him, she said. Daniel's stomach dropped through the floor. You want to see him? Not like that. God, not like... She grabbed his hand. Daniel, no. It's not what you think. I don't want him. I have never wanted anything less in my life than I want that man. She squeezed his hand hard, making sure he heard her. But for 7 years, that man's voice has been living in my head. You were never supposed to be forever. You were just where I rested. 7 years, Daniel. That's the voice that told me I wasn't worth choosing. That's the voice I've been fighting every single day. And it's his voice. Olivia, I need to give it back to him. Her eyes came up, and they were clear and fierce and absolutely certain. I need to stand in front of him healthy and happy and chosen and about to marry a man who ran into a burning building last week, and I need to hand that voice back to him and walk away and never carry it again. I've spent 7 years letting a coward define what I'm worth. I want to look him in the eye and take it back. Daniel stood there warring with himself. Every protective instinct he had was screaming, no, don't go near him, guys like that are poison. But he looked at her, at the woman who'd refused to fold when a company told her to move, who'd picked up the phone and hung up on the biggest offer of her life, and won. And he understood that this wasn't him rescuing her from Marcus. This was Olivia finishing something, on her own terms, again. Do you want me there? He asked. She considered it. Do you want to be there? I want to be wherever you are for the rest of my life. But this one... He shook his head slowly. This one might be yours to do alone. I think you already know that. And the look she gave him, the pure, stunned gratitude of a woman whose fiancé had just trusted her to fight her own battle instead of insisting on fighting it for her, was worth more than any promise he could have made. You're really going to let me go do this by myself, she said. I'm really going to trust you to do this by yourself, Daniel corrected. There's a difference. And I'll be at home with Ethan and my phone will be on, and if you need me, I'll be there in 9 minutes flat. But you don't need saving Olivia. You stopped needing saving a long time ago. You just didn't know it. She met Marcus 3 days later at a coffee shop across town in the middle of the afternoon, where everything was public and bright and safe. Daniel didn't hear about it until she came home. He was on the floor of the living room building a Lego fire station with Ethan when he heard her car in the driveway, and he was up and at the door before she'd gotten halfway up the walk, trying to read her face in the dim porch light and failing. Well, he said. Olivia walked past him into the house. She set down her purse. She took off her coat. She did all of it very slowly and very deliberately, and Daniel's heart was in his throat the entire time. Then she turned around, and she was smiling a small, quiet, unshakable smile he'd never seen on her before. He cried, she said. What? Marcus, he cried. She sat down on the arm of the couch. He sat there in that coffee shop and told me he made a mistake, that he'd thought about me every day for 7 years, that the woman he left me for made him miserable, and the whole thing fell apart, and he'd realized too late that I was the one who really loved him. He said... She shook her head, almost wondering at it. He said he'd give anything to go back and choose me instead. He actually said the word choose to my face. After 7 years, Daniel didn't breathe. And what did you say? Olivia looked at him, and the smile deepened, and there were tears standing in her eyes. But they weren't sad ones. They were the tears of a woman setting down something she'd been carrying for a very long time. I told him thank you, she said. You. I told him thank you. Because for 7 years his voice in my head told me I was the resting place, the comfortable one, the one nobody would choose. And I built a wall around my whole heart because of it, and I almost let that wall cost me you. She stood up and crossed the room to him. And then, sitting there watching this man I once thought was everything, beg me to come back, watching him small and sad and full of regret, I finally understood the truth. He wasn't rejecting me 7 years ago because I wasn't enough. He left because he wasn't enough. He was never able to see what he had. That was his failure. It was never mine. And I never had to fix myself to be worth choosing because I was always worth choosing. He just wasn't the man who could see it. Daniel felt his throat close up. So I told him thank you, Olivia went on, for showing me 7 years too late exactly what I dodged. And then I told him I was getting married in the spring to a man who told me to choose myself when he could have begged me to stay, who trusts me to fight my own battles, who's teaching his son that love means seeing somebody's worth when the whole world looks away. And I told him I hoped he'd find some peace someday. And then I got up and I walked out and I left his voice in that coffee shop. And Daniel, her own voice finally broke. I feel free. For the first time in 7 years that voice is gone. I gave it back. It's not mine anymore. And Daniel Carter pulled the woman he loved into his arms in the middle of a living room strewn with Lego pieces, with his son peeking around the corner, pretending not to eavesdrop, and he held her while she cried the last of 7 years' worth of a coward's poison out of her system. I'm proud of you, he whispered into her hair. I have never in my life been prouder of anybody. You didn't even come with me. That's exactly why I'm proud. You didn't need me to. You walked in there and you saved yourself all over again, just like you always do. He pulled back and looked at her. You know what the difference is between me and Marcus. He wanted you back the second he found out somebody else valued you. And me, I valued you when the whole rest of the world was too blind to. I didn't need somebody else to tell me what you were worth. I could see it. I've been able to see it for 2 years. Slow learner, she whispered, smiling through the tears. Slowest learner in the county, he agreed. But I got there. From around the corner, a small voice piped up, having completely failed at pretending not to listen. Did you tell the bad guy to go away? Ethan asked. Olivia laughed and wiped her eyes and held out her arm, and the boy came barreling across the room into the hug. I did, baby. I told the bad guy to go away. Good, Ethan said, fiercely muffled against her side. Because you're our mom now. Not his anything. Ours. That's right, Olivia said, and her voice was thick. I'm yours, both of you, for good. And later that night, after Ethan was asleep, after Ruth had called to hear the whole story and cried her way through it and pronounced that Marcus was once and for all a fool of historic proportions, Olivia stood at the window of the little gray house that was becoming her home, and Daniel came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her, and they stood there together in the quiet. Spring, she said softly. Spring, he agreed. My mother wants it sooner. She keeps saying she's sick, she's allowed to rush people. Your mother is going to beat this thing and dance at our wedding whenever we have it. You really believe that? I have to, Daniel said simply. So I do. Olivia leaned back against his chest, and outside the last of the winter was loosening its grip, and somewhere in the house a clock ticked toward a spring that was going to change everything, and for the first time in her entire life, Olivia Bennett was not waiting for the other shoe to drop. She was just happy, fully, completely without an asterisk, and she'd earned every bit of it herself. Spring came, and it brought a wedding, and it very nearly brought a disaster nobody saw coming. The morning of everything was ready. Ruth had made it. That was the miracle they'd all been praying for. 4 months of treatment of appointments Daniel drove her to, and mornings Olivia held her hair back, and evenings Ethan taped fresh drawings to her wall, and the doctors had used the word they'd all been afraid to hope for. Responding. She was responding. She wasn't out of the woods, they said, but she was walking toward the edge of them, and she'd made it to spring, and she was going to dance at her daughter's wedding, just like Daniel swore she would. She'd bought a dress for it, blue. She'd made Olivia promise not to look until the day. And on the morning of the wedding, an hour before it was supposed to start, Ruth collapsed in the back room of the bakery. Olivia found her. That was the part that would haunt her longest, walking in to check on her mother, and finding her on the floor, and for one white screaming instant, being right back on that other floor, 2 seasons ago on her knees in shattered bread, certain the worst thing in the world was happening. "Mom!" She was on her knees beside her before the scream finished. "Mom! Mom, look at me! Mom! Daniel!" Olivia's voice tore out of her at a pitch she didn't know she had. "Daniel!" He was there in seconds. He was always there in seconds. And where Olivia's whole world had collapsed into panic, Daniel dropped down and became something else entirely. The firefighter, the man who ran toward the thing everybody else ran from, calm and fast and certain. His hands were already checking, his voice already steady. "Ruth, Ruth, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can hear me." A pause. "Good. Good, she's squeezing Olivia. She's with us. She's okay, breathe." "She's not okay. She's on the floor. She's conscious. She's responsive. Her pulse is there. Olivia, look at me." He caught her eyes for one hard second. "I need you clear. Call 911, tell them exactly what I say. Can you do that?" And Olivia, shaking terrified in her wedding dress on the floor of her bakery, did it. Because he needed her clear, so she got clear. She'd learned that from him. You get clear because someone needs you to. Ruth came around fully before the ambulance even arrived. She'd fainted, dehydration, the stress of the morning, the toll of 4 months of treatment on a body that had been fighting hard. Not the thing they were all most afraid of. A scare, the paramedics said. A bad one, but a scare. "I ruined it," Ruth kept saying weakly from the stretcher, tears leaking sideways down her temples. "I ruined your wedding. 7 years I waited to see you happy, and I go and faint an hour before—" "Mom!" Olivia gripped her hand hard. "You did not ruin anything. Do you hear me? Nothing is ruined. There is no wedding without you in it, so we are not having a wedding until you're standing up in that blue dress, and I don't care if it's today or next month or next year." "It's today," Ruth said fiercely. "I did not survive 4 months of this to miss it over a fainting spell. Get me some water and a chair and my dress. We're doing this today." "Mom, I'm sick. I'm allowed to be stubborn." Her chin came up exactly like Olivia's did. "We're doing it today." And they did. They did it 4 hours late in the bakery instead of the garden they'd booked because Ruth refused to be more than 10 feet from a chair, and Olivia refused to be more than 10 feet from Ruth. They did it with the paramedics' blessing and a folding chair set up front and center so Ruth could sit for the parts she needed to sit for and stand for the parts that mattered. They did it surrounded by the smell of cinnamon and warm sugar in the place Olivia had built with her own 2 hands, which Ethan had said all those months ago was where Olivia's heart was, and the boy had been right, because there was no better place on earth for her to give it away. The whole neighborhood came. The same neighborhood that had once overlooked Olivia Bennett, that had whispered and stared and made her feel like the woman people were grateful for, but never chose. They packed into her bakery, in their Sunday best, and they cried, every one of them, because somewhere in the last 2 years, watching her take in a grieving man's son, watching her feed half the block, watching her build something beautiful out of the thing they'd all overlooked, they'd finally learned to see her. Mrs. Harrison of the salt roll incident sat in the front row weeping into a handkerchief. Ethan walked Olivia down the short aisle between the folding chairs. He'd insisted on it. "Somebody's got to give her away," he'd announced, "and Grandma Ruth has to be up front, so it's got to be me." 8 years old, in a tiny suit, walking the woman he'd chosen as his mother toward the father he was about to share her with, and his little face was so serious, so proud, so absolutely certain of the rightness of it all that half the room lost it before the vows even started. Daniel watched them come toward him and thought his chest would crack. He'd written vows. He'd rewritten them a dozen times. And when the moment came, standing in front of the woman he'd loved in silence for 2 years and out loud for 1 season, he found he couldn't read them off the card. So he set the card down. "Olivia," he said, 2 years ago you knocked on my door with a casserole. My wife had just died. I was drowning, and I didn't have the words for it, and I answered the door ready to hear one more person tell me they were sorry for my loss. One more person say they couldn't imagine one more useless kind thing. His voice was rough. And you didn't say any of it. You just handed me the dish and said, "I'll take Ethan whenever you need. You don't have to ask twice." And then you left. You didn't make me perform my grief for you. You didn't need anything from me. You just showed up and helped and left me my dignity. He had to stop and breathe. I fell in love with you that day. It took me 2 years to admit it because I'm the slowest learner in the county, and I almost lost you about 6 different times. And I'll spend the rest of my life grateful that you were patient with a scared man who couldn't get out of his own way. Olivia was crying. Everyone was crying. Ruth in the front row in her blue dress was crying hardest of all. I made a promise once, Daniel went on, that I would never love again, that I'd keep my heart locked up to protect my son. And it was the dumbest promise I ever made, because it turned out the surest way to hurt that boy was to keep him from the woman who was already his mother in every way that counts. So I'm making a new promise in front of everyone, and this one I'll keep till I die. He took both her hands. I promise you'll never spend one single day wondering if you were chosen. You are not the safe choice. You are not the comfortable one. You are not anybody's resting place. His voice broke clean in half. You're the something better, Olivia Bennett. You always were. And I'm the luckiest man who ever lived because I got smart just barely in time to marry you. There wasn't a dry eye in the building, and Olivia, who had a whole speech prepared pages of it, looked at the man in front of her, and at the boy holding her other hand, and at her mother in the blue dress she'd made it to spring to wear, and she folded up all her pages and said the only thing that mattered. For 32 years, she said, her voice shaking, I believed the best I could hope for was to be appreciated, to be useful, to be the one people were glad had shown up and then forgot about when something shinier came along. I built a whole life around being okay with that. She squeezed his hands. And then a firefighter I'd never met moved in next door with a broken heart and a little boy, and he looked at me, really looked at me, and he didn't wince, and he didn't pity me, and he didn't want to fix me. He just saw me, and he kept seeing me, every day for 2 years, even when I couldn't see myself. Tears streamed freely down her face. You didn't save me, Daniel. That's the thing I finally understand. You never once tried to save me. You just stood beside me and believed I could save myself, and it turned out I could. You gave me the one thing nobody ever gave me my whole life. You gave me back to myself. She laughed through the tears. So yes, 1,000 times yes. I choose you, first, best, on purpose, for the rest of my life. When they kissed, the whole bakery erupted, and Ethan threw himself into their legs, and Ruth stood up out of her chair on her own 2 feet, over the paramedics' objections, over everyone's objections, because she was sick and she was allowed to be stubborn. And she stood there in her blue dress and clapped until her hands hurt, watching her daughter get everything she'd prayed for over 7 long years. Marcus never showed up and never wrote again, and neither of them ever thought about him. The years that followed were not perfect. Nobody's are. Olivia's product line launched and did better than anyone predicted, and Bennett's Bakery went from 1 small shop to 3 across the city, and her name meant something now in the way she'd always dreamed. But there were hard days, too. There were nights Daniel came home from a call with a look in his eyes that meant it had been a bad one, and he'd sit at the kitchen counter and not talk, and Olivia learned that sometimes love means not needing him to. There were mornings the business felt like too much, and Daniel learned to open the bakery properly at last, though he was never, ever allowed near the sugar. They argued about small things. They had difficult days, but they faced all of it together. That was the thing that had changed. That was the whole thing. Ruth beat it. Not that spring, not that summer, but by the following winter, the doctors used the other word, the good one. The one that starts with R and means the war is won, even if the watching never fully ends. She moved into the little gray house with them. Daniel insisted, Olivia insisted, Ethan insisted loudest of all, and she became the beating heart of that home, the grandmother who spoiled the boy and bossed the household, and reminded her daughter on the rare day Olivia forgot exactly how far she'd come. And Ethan grew up in a house full of love, with a father who ran into fires, and a mother who filled the world with the smell of warm bread, and a grandmother who thought he hung the moon. He grew up knowing in the deepest part of him the thing his father had been so afraid he'd never learn, that not everybody leaves, that some people stay, that love isn't the thing you protect yourself from, it's the thing you build a life out of. Years later. On a spring morning that felt like an echo, Daniel came home early. He'd finished a shift ahead of schedule, and he walked up the path toward the little gray house that had grown a bakery-scented addition, and a garden Ruth tended, and a swing set Ethan had long outgrown, but nobody could bring themselves to take down. And before he could reach for the handle, the door opened. Olivia was standing there, flower on her forearms, a few strands of gray in her hair, now that neither of them minded, and she was smiling at him, the real smile, the one that reached all the way up to her eyes, the one he'd have crawled across broken glass to see. "You know," she said, leaning against the doorframe, "the first time you came home early, you changed everything." Daniel laughed, that same laugh, older, now worn soft at the edges. "I thought I was surprising you." Olivia reached out and took his hand the way she had 10,000 times since, and pulled him toward the warmth and the light, and the life they'd built out of 2 broken hearts and 1 stubborn little boy. "You were," she said, "but you were the one who got surprised." And she was right. Because that day, all those years ago, Daniel Carter had knocked on a door expecting to thank a kind neighbor and go on with his careful, locked-up, half-lived life. Instead, he'd found the woman the whole world had overlooked, the one everybody was grateful for, and nobody had ever chosen. And he'd discovered that she wasn't the fallback, wasn't the safe bet, wasn't the resting place. She was the whole point. She'd been the whole point all along. And a person's worth is never measured by the shape of their body, or the size of their bank account, or the mistakes in their past, or how many people were too blind to see it. It's measured by the love they carry and give away freely to a grieving man and a motherless boy expecting nothing back. Olivia Bennett gave that love away for years to people who overlooked her, and in the end, she got it all returned 100 times over for the rest of her life. That is where the story ends. Not with someone rescuing her, but with a woman who learned she was worth choosing, a man who was wise enough to choose her, and a family built by 2 people who finally fully saw each other. And they were chosen, both of them, first and best, and on purpose, every single day for the rest of their lives.